Tom and Rebecca had a lot of trouble hiring new people, and their hiring process took forever. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Dolfini, and you are here on the show, The Time Wealthy Advantage. And if you are a small business entrepreneur, if you're a family business owner, a business owner of any size, this show is for you. You are in the right place. Can you at all relate to Tom and Rebecca? I know I can, because I remember back in the days where I would set up a bunch of interviews, and if I got people to show up at all, it was really hard for me to even take them seriously as candidates, and it was just such an ongoing, mindless process. It was something we had to constantly do because of just this endless treadmill of interviewing over and over and over and over and over. And I must have interviewed literally 1,000 people in my day. And I got really good at it. And it wasn't that my interviewing skills got better, but something else shifted here. And again, in Tom and Rebecca's case, again, they would set up all these different interviews. And the reality was most people wouldn't even show. If they did show, it was really frustrating because they couldn't even really take them seriously as candidates because, they were wearing pajama pants to the interview. So, but for the people who were serious, again, meaning the people who weren't wearing penguin themed pajama pants, they would sit down, they would have a nice conversation with someone, they would send them away thinking they've got a great candidate, and then crickets. Nothing. Like they would never hear from that person again. They literally dropped off the planet. It was so incredibly frustrating. And then eventually, after maybe a dozen or so different interviews, eventually they would find someone that they could hire, and they would sit down, and they would go through all of the training. They'd bring them in, and they would treat them well as best as they could. Because again, they're operationally busy. They're just trying to give them, take as much time as they could to train them, because they were, they'd have to stop what they were doing and show this person what they were doing, or what they had to do. And, they'd no more get this person trained up, and then they'd leave to go work somewhere else for 25 cents more an hour, or they just stop showing up altogether. Again, they just drop off the face of the planet. And guess what? They'd have to repeat that entire process all over again. This problem is not new. Okay, so let me put this out there that this is a problem that's been going on for a really long time. And I want to point this out, and I'm going to make a bold statement here, is that the fact is they don't have a hiring problem. They don't have a hiring problem. They know how to hire. They really don't even have an interviewing problem, although I would make the argument that there should always be two interviews, right? The first interview should always be behavioral, and the second one should always be skill-based. And again, there should always be two interviews. So the behavioral-based interviews, again, are going to be in alignment with something we're going to be talking about here at the end, which is their core values of the business. And then the skills, you can always teach skills, but you can't teach core values. You just can't. If someone's either in alignment or they're not. So in this particular case, I don't think it's your job as a boss to teach them integrity and honesty. It's kind of hard they need to kind of come with stuff like that, right? But here's the thing. I don't think they have a hiring problem. I don't think they've got an interviewing problem. I think fundamentally they've got a culture problem. And company culture, and especially bad company culture, permeates every aspect of their business, and that's why they were having trouble. And unfortunately, this problem of company culture is very, very common among small businesses. It's like the bad breath of business that these small businesses have, because they just don't take the time to actually develop that. So this is what I'm talking about, that in terms of bad company culture, where, they've got bad managers. Again, they've got, we've all heard the clever adage that people come to good businesses, but they leave bad managers, right? And that's really true. They do come to good businesses, and they do leave bad managers. And a lot of times those bad managers are the owners of the company, because they don't have a management bench. They're not even, and if they did have managers, they're not even training those people to be managers. They're only making them managers because they've stuck around long enough just not to get fired, right? And that's generally how a lot of people, let's face it, that's how a lot of people do become managers, especially people who become managers of auto repair shops and things like that, just because that they are really skilled at their job of turning wrenches or doing the operational function does not mean that they are a good manager. Does not mean that they know automatically how to manage people. Those are two different sets of skills, right? So you have to think about this for a second. Imagine a company with a great brand. Imagine a company with a really strong culture. A company known for how well it treats its customers and how well it treats its employees. I worked for a company back, about 100 years ago. When I first got out of college, I worked for the Marriott. And the Marriott, I will tell you, they have such a strong culture, and it's all steeped in different things that we're going to talk about here in a second. With Ivan Misner, who is the founder of BNI, he talked a lot about traditions. He talked a lot about the mission of the organization. He talked about a lot about education. We'll get into that here in a second in terms of an interview that he had on his BNI podcast. But Marriott was really strong and steeped in company culture, and other company, and that's one of the things. I mean, I loved working for the Marriott. It ultimately just wasn't the job I wanted, and quite frankly, I just wanted to go out and do my own thing. But my time at Marriott was wonderful. I really enjoyed working for them because their company culture was so strong. Look at other company cultures like Southwest Airlines, right? Again, their customers, they love Southwest Airlines. I love Southwest Airlines as a business model. I think they're fantastic. Personally, I don't like the cattle call thing. I actually like having a seat assigned, and I'm a little bit more snooty when I like to fly, so I tend to fly Delta. But Southwest Airlines, I mean, the people who love Southwest, they love Southwest. And the people who work at Southwest tend to love working for Southwest, right? These are companies with amazing cultures that are really, really hard to beat. Look at Microsoft. Look at HubSpot. Look at Google. Heck, even Zoom. I mean, people just love working for these companies, and they have cultures that are hard to beat. And as a result, not only do they attract top talent, but they keep them for much longer than their industry peers. And that's really interesting, and that's really telling, because they don't have to necessarily lure them in with a bunch of dollars and then whip them like rented mules. They want to stay because they're treated like human beings, right? And like, what a crazy thing. And that's really the funny thing when people are talking about, well, how do I hire and how do I get these millennials to work? Millennials don't have a problem with working, but they just don't want to feel like they're a cog in a machine. And good for them, because too long, us Gen Xers who are out there just like, oh no, you just go out there and you pay your dues, and then we're just gonna, then the next round of people that come in, we're gonna whip them like rented mules, because that's the dues we had to pay. They're not about that. They want a good work-life balance, and good for them. So company culture takes time. And that's the thing that you have to understand, is that when you're developing a company culture, that's time that really comes at a premium. That's almost a luxury that business owners just can't afford, especially when they're too busy trying to do everything in their business from the operational side and the sales side and the lead gen side, and then every now and again meet with their accountant, or generally trying to do all four functions. Let's face it, like I said earlier, their managers tend to be unskilled and untrained, and they're taught only to catch people doing something wrong, rather than actually praising people for doing something right once in a while, right? Now, let me talk about this interview with Dr. Ivan Misner, and he was the founder of BNI. If you're not familiar with BNI, it used to stand for Business Networking International. Now it's just BNI. But it's the world's leading networking organization that has chapters in almost 80 different countries. And he talks about culture all the time. I will tell you, I am such a fan of BNI. I was in BNI for 14 years. I was an area director for a while, and I was a director and did all sorts of different things with them. But I really, I'm just very, very happy with my time in BNI. But I will tell you, in one particular episode, and he used to talk about this all the time, but in this one particular episode, named Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast, he really lays it out in terms of the 5 key areas that really helps define a company culture. And I will tell you too that BNI has a very, very, very well developed culture. And I'm gonna put a link to that episode in the description if you'd like to hear that for yourself. It's not a very long episode. I think it's maybe 13 minutes, but absolutely worth listening to. But he talks about tradition. He talks about mission. He really emphasizes engagement in the organization and recognition in the organization, but he also makes such a strong point about education. And BNI was always about education. I mean, you could not. I mean, I can't even tell you. I think he's written maybe 25 different books or co-authored 25 different books with people within the BNI organization. And I think all of them hit the New York Times bestseller lists. I mean, he is a very prolific author, and that's just the books. That's not even counting all the videos and podcasts and all the things around education. And BNI is a culture of education. And he referenced these things as core values. So I'm just going to, I know that's a little bit difficult. That's a lot to kind of process and thinking, okay, well, that's great, but I'm in business for 3 years. I don't have many traditions. Yeah, you do. You have traditions. This is your company. You can establish the traditions now. What is your company mission? Where is this thing going? What is, make sure that you're engaging with the people in your organization. How is the engagement? What's the engagement even like? How are you recognizing people, and how are you continually educating them? Now go through the episode there, but that's a really good place to start within those five points he talked about. In terms of the core values in your business, just ask 2 separate questions. Number 1, what's important to you about this business? What's important to you? And think about it in this other way. How would the world be worse off if you were no longer in business? If you went out of business tomorrow, how would the world be worse off because you were no longer doing the thing you did or making the widgets that you were making? How would it be worse off, right? Another way to think of this is that, let's face it, our businesses are just an extension of us, right? So because the business is an extension of us, we walk around with core values that are important to us. Now, we learn from our excesses, right? We learn from the excesses that are good, and we learn from the excesses that are bad. So use those excess examples in your life to determine what is valuable to you. So what I mean is, like, say, for example, that you had a friend, okay, and that friend wandered off the reservation and started acting in a way that was like, dude, like, where are you going? Why are you acting this way? I can't, like, you're heading down a path I can't follow. Right? And if that friend started acting or doing things that were against your core values, stop, and you had to let that friend go, stop for just a second and do a self-assessment and say, what was it about that friend's behavior that was such a violation for me? And generally the opposite of that is going to be a core value of yours. So maybe it was about being in integrity, right? Where, what you say and what you do are in alignment. Or maybe it was honesty. Maybe it was, maybe it was something else, right? But maybe it was, doing honest business, whatever it was, see what its opposite was. And then think about the good things, like when you had a really, really positive thing going on in your life, where you would say, oh my gosh, that was such a good time. Well, what was it about that? What was it about that you can maybe identify that you'll help bring in into reality as what one of the core values is of your personal life? Then once you've got some of those things defined, once you've got some of those things figured out, then you could say, okay, I really want my business to be these several things. Personally, I think 5 is a really good number for core values. And you can have sub-definitions under each one, and that's maybe a video for another time. And I'm going to land the plane here in a minute because I don't want this video to get too long, but think about your core values. Once you've got your core values defined, don't just roll them out like you're coming down from the top of the mountain and go, these are our core values, right? Sometimes they take a little bit of time to evolve, and they will evolve over time. I've got mine for Strategic Boardroom that I've been working on now for probably about 6 months or so, and I'm just going to let them simmer. I'm not going to kind of go, these are the core values. I've got some pretty close to done, but sometimes they still need some tweaking of the verbiage. Okay. But once your core values are defined, and once you start to really figure out what your core values of your business are going to be, I want you to think of how you're going to weave them into the DNA of your business. Think about how you're going to bring them into the interview process. Think about how you're going to bring them into the hiring process. Think about how you're going to bring them into the onboarding process with your new hires, right? Do you have an onboarding process, right? Other than, hey, welcome to your first day, fill out your tax forms. Right? Not much of an onboarding process. Think about your onboarding process even with your new customers. How does that work, right? How are you going to knit your core values into your employee evaluations and reviews? And finally, think about how you're going to weave these core values into your coaching and training when your associates need it. So look, this is a tall order, and I'm just going to tell you right now, this can't be rushed. If this is something that you'd like help with, just consider hopping on a 30-minute call with me. It's not a sales call. I don't operate that way. I'll put my calendar link in the description. But don't wait. I'm going to leave it active for a while, but no offense to you. If I start getting too busy with my current customers, or if I get like a huge influx, I'm going to disable the link. Again, no offense, but I've got to take care of my people. All right. That's all I have for today, everyone. You take care. We'll see you next time.